litigation as a means to achieve the goals and objectives of our clients.
Welcome, Sara Lachman from Lachman Law. I'm really happy to have this conversation with you, not only because I haven't seen you in like 3 months, because our weekly meetings have been on Zoom and I'm not really good at showing up at those meetings, but because so much has happened in the world of immigration.
All right. Hi, guys. Thanks for having me, Peter. It's cool to talk with you in this virtual space. My name is Sara Lachman. I operate a small boutique law firm focusing in immigration based in Brooklyn.
And it seems like if you didn't read enough in law school, you've had to read a lot over the last 2 months with the result of the coronavirus and the government's response to immigration. So I understand there was a proclamation signed by the president in April of 2020.
Yes.
So what was that?
So there have been a number of changes with immigration, and especially coronavirus related. So every couple months, it seems we're getting new information. So in April, the president signed a proclamation, which was essentially limiting travel into the United States and visas being issued in certain categories. In April, the ban was mostly related to employment visas for immigrant-based employment visas, which are people who are coming into the United States as permanent residents through some sort of business work program. Also included under that were parents of United States citizens, siblings of United States citizens, and also adult children of United States citizens. So any of those categories, since April, those visas are no longer being issued in overseas consulates.
So did that mean that if someone was already here legally with some kind of status, they'd be able to stay?
Yeah, so actually both the April proclamation and the more recent proclamation from Monday are only applying to people who are not in the United States currently. So if you're currently in the United States, it doesn't change the process at all. Only for those who are applying for a visa to then enter the United States through a consulate. Yeah,
so I was reviewing your latest your email address or your latest newsletter, and it mentioned a whole plethora of kinds of visas that were affected by these. And I don't know if many people really know what they all stand for, but you did mention work visas. So what's that?
Yeah, so there are so many different ways to enter the United States, and there are various different work visas. So the ban from April focused on putting a halt to those work visas that were permanent residents. The new ban from Monday focuses on specific work visas that are temporary workers. Mm-hmm. So the ones specifically banned are H-1B, H-2B, and also J's and L visas. So those H's are pretty much the majority of employment visas that are coming into the United States on a temporary visa will fall under an H category. So it's a big chunk of H of work visas that have been suspended.
And I guess just briefly for those who may not be initiated, an H visa or an H1, what kind of work is that? You said it's temporary work, but what's the difference between those kinds of visas?
H-1Bs are for specialty occupations. So these are specialized in their field. A lot of times, doctors, those types of careers that we need, that we probably lack in our own supply, so we're bringing in specialty workers. H2s are less education is required, but they're non-agricultural positions. And then Ls are intercompany transfers, and Js usually apply to temporary workers, usually students who are getting work experience, but also go into researchers as well.
Mm-hmm. And what about the au pair?
The au pairs are usually Js. So that falls under the sort of temporary, usually someone who's looking for work experience, gaining experience abroad. Those are Js.
And do you think that the recent proclamations were the result of health concerns or more to keep people in America employed?
It's been It's been released as a way to make sure that as our own unemployment rates are going up, that those jobs are not being given to overseas workers.
Mhm.
However, it's interesting because it doesn't seem like that's the real reason, because anyone who's already here, you can still work. This is only applying to new visas. Anyone who already has a work visa can still renew in the United States, as long as on the date of the proclamation, which was yesterday, June 24th, they had a current immigrant visa that was valid.
Okay. And what's interesting to me is you mentioned in your newsletter restrictions about spouses and family members. Now, I know that there was a big area of immigration where if a family member lived in the United States, they would then petition to have a relative from overseas to get some kind of citizenship status to come over and to come into the country. Was that changed under the April 22nd proclamation?
Yes, under the categories, there's certain categories. So to request a family member, they have to fall or to petition a family member, they have to fall in a very specific relative, like aunts and uncles. You can't petition anyway. You can petition children, parents, and brothers and sisters. But as of the April proclamation, they're no longer issuing visas for parents, adult children, so that's a child who's over the age of 21, or siblings. So those visas are no longer being issued since it's supposed to be temporary, so since the April proclamation.
And that's probably affecting a lot of families.
Absolutely.
And you said it's temporary. Is that set to expire, these proclamations?
Right now, they're set to expire at the end of the year, but it's up in the air. The proclamations themselves are written with ways to expand within 60 days, expand within 30 days. So they seem to be phrased with an expectation for more or even additional adjustments.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose that because these are executive orders, they're not really law. They're just sort of, they're in effect, but it's not an act of Congress necessarily. It's really just an act of the executive branch saying that, because of the COVID-19 response, we have to put a freeze on a lot of immigration activity.
Yeah, that's how, like I said, that's how it's being phrased. It is temporary, but also it's not necessarily, these aren't bans that are supposed to prevent people from coming in and spreading the virus. They haven't been set up that way at all. They're specifically set up for not authorizing new people to work in the country who are not already here.
Interesting. So there's also something in your newsletter about bans. So what's going on with banning people from coming from certain countries?
This is specifically for coronavirus and to stop the spread. That's what these bans are set up as. So these are people currently it's people coming in from European Schengen countries, as well as China, and now Brazil has recently been added. So if you've been present in any of those countries for the previous 14 days before entering the United States, you won't be allowed to enter.
Even if you have proper citizenship here in the U.S., they still won't let you come in.
No, so it doesn't apply to United States citizens or residents or their spouses. So if you're a citizen of the United States, you have your passport, you were born here, you can still travel, you can still leave and come back. There's no restriction on our actual citizens. The restrictions are specifically outside of immediate family members and those who are already citizens or residents. So any other type of visa.
So the other kind of visas that may exist are, I guess, tourist visas.
Tourist visas, work visas if someone's left the country. They have a valid visa, but they're in Europe. They won't be able to come back in, even though their visa is currently valid and they're currently employed.
You had listed a whole bunch of other bans in possible review.
Yeah, so
what
right
was a
now,
reminder of those that are currently restricted? So individuals from Iran, Libya, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, North Korea, Venezuela. Like those people are already not allowed to come because of the COVID response?
That was actually a ban issued at the beginning of the Trump administration, which was widely referred to as the Muslim ban. So it's been litigated in Supreme Court a few times, but it was originally issued as a temporary 60-day ban. However, it still has not been lifted. So in the newsletter, I wanted to give an overview of just all of the current people who are not allowed to enter the United States at the moment. So because that ban is still in effect, still people from Iran, Libya, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, some North Korean and Venezuelan as well are unable to enter the country under that ban. That's completely unrelated to coronavirus.
And those individuals from that country, does that also include individuals who have legal status here in the U.S.?
It's not supposed to, but they aren't issuing it. There's been a lot of litigation over people who already had status, who were residents that were still being detained when they came in. Hopefully there's not as much of that going on. There hasn't been a lot of the news, so I haven't heard of it. But even with visas and family members, without applying for some sort of waiver to get around the ban, it's just a ban. There can be waivers available, sometimes difficult to obtain, but without a waiver, the initial response is just no.
Fascinating. So there's also this thing, the Supreme Court recently came down with a decision affecting DACA. So that's also the Dreamer kind of statute. Can you just explain briefly what DACA was intended to do and what it does do?
Sure. So DACA started in previous administrations. It came out as also an executive order. So this executive order allowed children who arrived in the United States before their 16th birthday, were living in the United States since 2007, and who were physically present in 2012 when the order issued, also who were educated or in school and pursuing education, as well as not having any sort of felony or severe misdemeanor background. So it was giving an opportunity for people who fell in that category to get a work permit, because essentially these are kids who came with their parents, sometimes as newborns, sometimes definitely always under 16. They had no choice in the matter. So for a lot of people, this is the only place they've ever called home. Some don't even speak the language of their home country. So it's a way to give these people in that category an opportunity to work. It's not codified in law, so there's no pathway to citizenship. It's a temporary work permit that you have to renew and reprove every 2 years in order to stay in the country. You actually can't leave the country either currently.
Wow.
If you have status.
So with the implementation of DACA, people were now, the Dreamer population that you just referenced, those people were allowed to have a social security number and be able to work legally?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And were they also entitled, I mean, you can be a non-legal alien, I guess, or you could have do you have to have status here to have a driver's license to drive legally? Like
that depends on the state. So actually this past year, New York issued a bill. There's a bill called the Green Light Bill, which now allows for New York residents to apply for driver's licenses, irrelevant of their status. But that's a state question, so it depends on the state you're in. Mm-hmm. So, sorry, keep with the question.
It's just so interesting to me how people can live in this country and be part of this Dreamer cohort, but still lack a lot of the same privileges that naturalized or American citizens have. So that would be even as simple as the right to work. I presume in some on a state-by-state basis, you can get a driver's license. I guess in certain states, on a state-by-state basis, you can get food stamps or other like Social Security or other kinds of government support.
Benefits aren't usually, because any Dreamer doesn't actually have, they only have a work permit. So essentially, and they don't even have, they're not residents of the United States. It's really, DACA stands for Deferred Action of Childhood Arrival. So it's a deferred action of a deportation, basically. Like we know you're here unlawfully and we're not going to deport you right now, is the only thing it's saying. You can work and we won't deport you right now unless you get arrested.
And that's fascinating. So under the current administration, there were some proposed executive orders to change the old executive order about DACA requirements. Can you tell us what the change was that was recently challenged in the Supreme Court?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, President Trump just ended the program. The program was just ended. So it's like, we're not doing it anymore. You've got 6 months to get out of the country. So that's what was really being argued in this Supreme Court decision that came down last week. Mm-hmm. And the final decision actually didn't say that President Trump couldn't take away this power. It just said you can't do it like that. Mm-hmm. You can't just say, you've been here your whole life, get out now. Mm-hmm. So
that was it was a 75-page decision, and I just started glancing at it now in advance of our phone conversation. It seemed to be sort of a decision based on the Administrative Procedure Act, which, not to get too much into the weeds, but for executive rulemaking authority that's delegated to the agencies under statute, they have to weigh certain factors and give a hard look review to certain enactments that they want to do on an administrative level. And I believe one of the points of this decision was that they didn't give a hard look review, or it was arbitrary and capricious, their decision to act in the manner they did. Is that sort of correct?
Arbitrary and capricious, absolutely. Yeah, that's
so I guess the practice of immigration law is always changing.
Always changing. And even with DACA, there are currently bills trying to enact it into law so that there will be a pathway to actual residency. But there's also a push for ending the program. So it's just, whichever happens first, it's still up in the air. This is really good news for now, but it's also not permanent news. So
do you anticipate, I don't foresee lack of a change in leadership or majority in the House and the Senate or the presidency all going to one political party, that you're going to get any legislative response pushed through to this, the Dreamer issue. So do you anticipate there'll be more executive action coming at some point?
Unfortunately, yeah, I kind of think there will be. Mm-hmm. It's all a wait and see, but it does feel like it's an area of the law that's been particularly attacked, which is, it's been a tough fight, but I don't think it's over quite yet.
It's fascinating to me how the way that the system was structured in the Constitution. These are supposed to be laws that are passed by the House and the Senate and then signed by the president into law. But because of such the dysfunction of the congressional process, reasonable people don't seem to be able to get together over the last 6 to 8 years to put a package together that's palatable to any of them. So it seems to be left up to the presidents to do whatever they want, which to me seems just totally irrational and not the way the system was designed to be run.
I 100% agree with that sentiment. That's a really good overview. Mm-hmm. And it's true, and immigration falls under the executive branch because, when everything was created, when this country was founded, there wasn't an INA, there wasn't laws on who can come in. I mean, since Ellis Island, there have always been like, oh, okay, are you sick? Yeah, okay, come in. Do you have enough money? All right, you can come in. But as far as structured laws, we didn't have that at the beginning because we were built off of, we're created from people just wanting to come over. So it has been put together in a bit of a mess, to be honest.
Do you find that, aside from the DACA executive order, are there like other executive orders from years and years ago that that practitioners in immigration law are still having to refer to, or has mostly everything become law where it's in the statute?
That's a great question. I mean, from my practice and from what I've seen in recent years, as this is the only like executive order, but it's not that I can think of. So I don't want to say that with 100% certainty.
We'll just cut that out.
Huh? Yeah.
We'll delete this part.
But yeah, there've been like changes in law throughout the year. There was a big change in the 90s, which actually kind of backed up the immigration court system since the mid 90s, and which has carried on through now, and another change I think in 2001. But all of that has been actually written in law, so you're referring to codes, you're referring to sections, not just via executive order number 456.
Mm-hmm. So interesting, the administrative state. One other thing that came up, I guess, is there's a new guidance or rules on asylum seekers. What's that all about?
So to understand, it takes just a little bit of background. To seek asylum, you're essentially saying, I can't stay in my country anymore because I'm being persecuted. I'm going to die. There are a lot of little nuances to it, but you can't request it unless you're in the United States. So a new rule has been issued. I think it's 368 pages just on the employment authorization for asylum seekers. So you have to request asylum in court, but court dates are so backed up, it takes 5 years, sometimes more, to get a final decision in your case. So because of the backlogs, there's an opportunity for an asylum seeker who's in the country to apply for a work permit. Similar to DACA, it's 2 years at a time. You have to still be in court proceedings, and it's just the general here work. So hopefully you can hire a lawyer and finish your case. So now that rule is being extended to 365 days with your case pending. So you have to have requested, you have to have already been waiting for a decision for a year before you can even ask to work in the country.
So it's in essence made it more difficult for people who are here with asylum proceedings pending to get working papers. Exactly.
Which makes honestly makes it more difficult, because an asylum is almost, not 100%, but almost impossible to win without an attorney, because it's very legal specific. You have to fall under very certain categories. Mm-hmm. A lot of immigrants who are fleeing from their country don't have the money to pay for an attorney. And even though our country has the right to representation, it's not granted by the states when it comes to immigration. So there's no, like, if you have a criminal, if you don't have an attorney, one will be appointed for you. That's not an option in immigration court. So a lot of people, even if they have a strong claim, could be denied just because of their lack of representation.
That's fascinating. So maybe that's sort of like a disincentive to seek asylum, because once you get here, you're going to be on public assistance for a year before you can file for working papers.
And you can't even be on public assistance. So if you don't have status in this country, you don't have the opportunity to request any kind of benefit. And actually, something that's changed recently as well, this is in February, so a little bit further back than our current discussions, but there's been a new public charge rule. So even those who are legally petitioning their family members or anyone, they have to show proof that this person who will be immigrating won't become a public charge in the United States. And they're checking credit scores, they're checking a history of what you've been, of any benefits you've applied for. They're checking all sorts of things to kind of further restrict immigration, but on a financial basis, not just on a family level or any kind of code or executive order level.
Are the courts still open to hear cases for immigration? Like, what's happening?
Oh, with the courts. So the opening date has been pushed back and back and back, and some courts are starting to reopen. So right now, at least in New York, there's no real guidance as to the date. They're saying the week of the 14th is the week it's going to be, the courts are going to be open.
July.
July, yeah. New Jersey is definitely opening that day, and some of the procedures are changing. So in New York and New Jersey, some courts in New York and New Jersey, because they're various, they're starting to allow for hearings on the telephone for clients who have representation. So if you have an attorney, you may not have to physically attend your hearings.
Fascinating. Well, this has been a really exciting and interesting discussion. I'm so glad that you sent out your newsletter, which had all this great information on it. As soon as I got it, I was like, I got to call Sara. Yeah, I got to call her because there's so much in here that's happening, and it's so fresh, and it's so happening today. And I hope everyone finds this helpful. I am going to provide a link to your website that has your contact information at the bottom of the screen. And I hope that if you have questions out there, please call Sara Lachman, Lachman Law. She's incredible. Sara, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.